What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we're going to talk to you about the brand new BougeRV 12-volt inverter. This specific model right here is a 2000 watt 12-volt inverter. They do make the same inverter, but a 1000 watt model. That model number is BV122000. This model number, the 2000 watt, is BV122000. The easy way to look at it is BV, BougeRV, and then you got the 12 volt, right? 2000, this one, right? So that's pretty much how that goes. They're pretty much the same inverter, obviously, except for the capacity, but there is a small difference with the connection at the back. For the 1000 uses kind of like ring terminals and less of the studs that they have on this model. But anyways, as you saw earlier, or hopefully you saw earlier, this heat gun can push this inverter to roughly about 1500 watts closely for a good amount of time. Adding the fan got it to maybe like 1700 watts. There was a short time somewhere earlier where we ran it in at 2000, right above 2000, like 2200, and it cut right off. So it does not have a lot of headroom above 2000. So just think of 2000 as the peak, all right? And obviously, as you probably can tell just by looking at the size, this is a high frequency inverter and not a transformer based inverter, right? So they've actually packed a lot of features into this inverter. So if you want to know more about this inverter, stick with us. So as you can see right here, this is the front of the inverter, and the inverter is currently powered on with the switch, and it has a blue power light indicator and a red light here indicator for fault. For some reason, even when you turn the inverter off using the switch, the red light comes in up on here as fault. So the way I look at the fault icon, or the LED, is really red means that it's not really working, right? Even though blue means the power is connected, it's just not really working. That's probably the better way to interpret it, right? So the first thing you're gonna notice off the back is it has a remote display. I did not peel the plastic off of this like, you know, most people probably would, and as I probably should, because it'll probably make the screen look a little bit better, but you know, I just didn't do that. Anyways, the point of it is it connects to this unit via kind of like a old cell, what do you call it, RJ11 cable. Okay, so if you take a look at this cable, it's a flat RJ11 type cable, and it does have pretty much all the wires in running up in this cable, right? All the wires go to it, and it connects to this top right here, and it's a pretty good lengthy amount of cable, you know, probably so that you can mount this wherever you're, you know, you need to put it, and then you can put maybe this closer to where you're actually going to be, you know, living or moving around. Especially if you put in an RV, you want to put this like in a cabin or downstairs or whatnot. You can mount this up here and kind of know everything you need to going on with this inverter up here, right? So as you can see, like I said, it's got the plastic on it, but it has 4 knockouts that you can knock out, where you can screw it in or install it permanently. Don't expect this to be waterproof, obviously, because this part is not waterproof, but you know, for the all intents and purposes of just mounting it on a piece of wood or wherever you want to put it, it's going to hold steady right there. I don't think mine included the screws. I may be wrong, but I don't think I saw the screws. You know, no biggie, right? First of all, you'll see on here it says BougeRV. It's set, the input batteries right now are set to, or the batteries voltage right now is 13.2, and it's connected at 60 hertz, right, for the AC output. So it's interesting because this thing you would imagine be closer to the output, but you know, this is only talking about the battery. The output voltage right now is 0 because it's not really on, right? The wattage going out here is what's 0 because it's also not on, and this is pretty much a battery status indicator. This pure sine wave looking icon pretty much just means it's telling you it's a pure sine wave, and this happy icon means pretty much everything is happy, right? So you can turn this backlight on and off by hitting this button here, turns it on and off. If you want to turn the AC between 110 volts to 120 volts, you hit this button here, and a switch between the 110 and 120. I'm not sure if people need this a lot, especially in the US, because I think in the US most of the appliances and things you're going to be connecting to is expecting anywhere between 110 to maybe 130 or 120, something like that, right? So this one may not be used too much. If you're wondering what that does, that's what happens here. As you saw in the intro of the video, or hopefully you saw, when you hit this button, the inverter has to turn off and switch to the the other selected one. It can't switch it hot like in real time while it keeps the things that are plugged in or loaded on, right? So when you press this, it will turn off and reset to the next voltage, but like I said, loads will be disconnected. This right here, obviously the on off button, turns on and off the inverter, right? So as you can see, the inverter is not actively powering anything, but if I hit this button here, it'll make a beep, right? And then you can see this voltage icon will start climbing up, and hopefully you can see that red LED where it says fault is no longer on, meaning that the inverter is now actively powering these outlets on, right? So 120, 119, and these outlets are now on. So if you were to disconnect this in the middle of using it, it's not really a problem because this is really just a control interface for this inverter. You can make changes on here, but you can operate this inverter without the controls, right? So that's how that really works, right? So let's go ahead and talk about some of the obvious things here. We have two AC outputs, AC output like a standard 15 output and a 20 amp output here. Obviously, you can't really draw maximum power from both because both of the wattage combined is going to be peaked out at 2000. But in case you had a 20 amp cord, you can use it there, right? Obviously, there's an on and off switch. We turned off. The unit turns off. There is another USB port, if I can remove this, down here. It's a 5 volt up to 3 amps. That's about 15 watts right here. It's got a grounding lug right here, which does include a ground cable that looks exactly like this, right? And this is a terminal block just in case you wanted to hardwire in, terminals or mount this somewhere down under the RV and then, bring terminals out to like your outlet. That's where that is, all right? So the other obvious thing you'll see on here is that it's got ventilation holes for the air to suck in and cool the heatsink, which is attached to the MOSFETs and all that kind of stuff. So right here is obviously a top. It says BougeRV, standard marketing. It's all imprinted on here. So it feels like an aluminum type casing or heatsink. It's got mounting holes here, here, and here. The front side and the same on the back side. So if you were to mount it, that's how it is, right? And it's pretty much cut ends and not ring holes. So you have to make sure when you're mounting it, make sure you either mount it in place or measure very precisely, okay? Other than that, no mounting holes and stuff like that on that side or on this side, as you can see here, pretty standard. The back side is interesting because here is the back side of it, right? So on my system right now, I currently have a breaker that kind of isolates this inverter to the battery, so I can kind of mess with it a little bit more safely, or I can completely isolate it when I need it to do something, even though this is just a test review video. But it does also include these lug covers alternating, so this one on here and then this one on here, right? So it is a little bit more, I want to quote unquote, safe because the lugs are not exposed after they're installed. And also they've alternated the lug patterns, right? So the lug positive goes this way and negative goes this way. Therefore, for some reason, if you accidentally drop something, it wouldn't really have a possibility to short that out. And that is probably a small detail that I think will probably be overlooked, but is very much appreciated, all right? If you want to look at the bottom of the inverter, there's really nothing else saying except for that it passed, quality control and inspection and other specs and your serial number of that inverter. Some of the other things they include when you get this inverter is obviously the manual, and it's a pretty decent manual. It's got, a lot of the stuff in English, although you can tell whoever wrote it, English is probably not their first language, but it's good enough so that you can actually get the details on what's going on, right? So all of the information and specifications and stuff like that are in here. If you need to look it up, you can also look it up online. And what thing will also help you is probably the app, all right? But before we get to the app, let's go ahead and talk about the other things they included, which is this cable right here. It's a pretty short, maybe about a foot long cable, and also this red cable here, along with the grounding cable, which I don't know where it is right now, right? But this cable is roughly, I want to say, somewhere between 3 and 4 gauge. It's actually, if you look on here, it says about 25 millimeters, right? So I'm not sure what that equates to an AWG, but that is probably one big downside I would knock on this inverter, mainly because it's a 2000 watt 12 volt inverter. So if you take 2000 and divide that by 12, I don't know what that really comes out to, but it's probably somewhere close to about 160 something, right? So if you're saying you're going to be drawing, assuming this inverter was 100% efficient, which is not, somewhere around 166 or 170 amps or whatever through this cable, it's probably not the best size cable, right? So one thing I would like to see improved on this is just include bigger cables, maybe even 2-gauge cables or something like that, just to give it a little bit more headroom, and just make sure that you have enough cable and you're not like unwiring it or causing a fire hazard or anything like that, right? So these cables are short run, so that may be one of the reasons they did that. But who is really going to be installing this in their system with a cable this long, right? So that's to its own, right? So anyways, let's go take a look at the app, because it does include an app, and it is available on Android and iOS, and there is a code in here where you can scan the QR code to get the app for iOS and Android. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the app, right? I've already installed the app from the App Store, and here is the app. One thing I will tell you is that you have to create an account to use the app with the inverter. You cannot add any devices to your app or your account without creating the account, which I would really ask them to kind of fix that, because I don't think that's probably the wisest decision, mainly because some people just want to connect to it Bluetooth, use it, and not have to worry about it being in their accounts and all that kind of fun stuff. But that is one improvement that I would like, right? So when you want to add it, you hit the plus button up here. It'll do a scan and see if it can find it, and then once you find it, you can add it here. I've already added mine. You can see on here it says my devices, and the device is online. Currently, the battery voltage is 13.2. You can turn it on and off from the app, as you can tell. So if I hit that, it'll turn off. If I hit that, it'll turn on. It tells you what the real-time voltage and the current is and the frequency, and also the device temperature, right? For today, it tells you roughly how much you've used it for today. The data for the day, which I don't think the data that I'm showing you on here is entirely accurate, because I've used it way more than just 0 watts today. So that's probably, if I had to imagine, the data that's in here is probably the data that from when you have the app connected to the inverter. It's not that the inverter stores the data and then sends it to the app once it connects. I think this is just when the information about the runtime when the app is connected, right? So make sure you keep that in mind. So there's interesting things, like I said, you could do in here, mainly because you can go into the settings part here, and you can go ahead and set like over discharge voltage settings. So for some reason, if you had like, lead acid batteries or something that would probably get damaged if you discharge it too low. Lithium iron phosphates or LiPo4 batteries usually have BMS built in that will prevent over discharge. So I usually don't have to worry about that. But in case you wanted to worry about that, that's where you would go and set it. And you can also set a over discharge reminder voltage, which is kind of like a notification, such that it's going to send you a pop-up saying, hey, you're about to hit the low cutoff, and that's what that would do, right? You want to set that just a little bit higher, or it will automatically be set just a little bit higher than your discharge voltage cutoff. You can change 50 or 60 hertz in case what's going up in here, and also 110 and 120, but that's all configurable inside the app, right? So taking a look at the app, let's go ahead and hit the switch to the heat gun and turn it on so you can see it in action. Hopefully you can hear, I just kicked it on. It's on low, drawing 545 watts. And as you can tell, the battery voltage will dip. All battery voltages will dip once they are put under load, right? So 12.8 here, we'll hit the fan. Let me hit the heat to maximum heat, but low fan speed. So now we're climbing up to closer to 900. Not sure if you heard it, but the fans on the inverter just kicked on. So let me go ahead and set the fan speed to high, which will bring you to about 1200, closer to 13. Sometimes it will get to 14. Let me plug in this fan here. So now we have a small fan inside the garage going. It's kind of pretty much on low, and you can hear that it's right around like 1500 watts of output power, and the battery voltage is at 12, pretty much 11.8. I'm using a LiPo4 12.8 volt 100 amp hour batteries. I have two of them connected in parallel, so it can draw more than 100 amps from the batteries because they're 100 amp BMS batteries. But as I said earlier, in case you wanted to run this at its peak or more closer to 2000, then you want to be making sure you're using the right batteries for this application, right? Let me go ahead and hit the power button on the heat gun, let it cool down such that you can see it ramp down just slowly. And as you can tell there, the fan noise you hear right now is the inverter. So the fan noise is, decently loud. It's not quiet by any means, but if you have it stored away from you because you have access to the controller, then it's probably not going to bother you too much. But if you're going to put it somewhere where you're going to be sleeping, that's probably not the best idea. All right, so that right there is the BougeRV 2000W 12-volt inverter, and it is a nice little inverter which they've packed a bunch of features into, right? They got a offset controller and also Bluetooth connectivity with the app. But like I said, if there are two improvements they can make, I would say one, include better better gauge wires. And I can't even tell if these are maybe copper clad aluminum or just pure copper. Just basically going by flexibility alone, it doesn't feel like it would be pure copper, but that's a terrible way to tell. You probably have to cut it to check it out. But like I said, better cables, and also all right, so that right there is the BougeRV 2000W 12-volt inverter. Like I said, the biggest difference between 12,000 and the 1,000 besides capacity is the 1,000 has like ring terminals. This one has the lugs, all right? But they've packed a lot of features into this high frequency inverter for a 12-volt inverter. Like obviously you get the controller, you got the Bluetooth connectivity and the app and all that kind of fun stuff. But if I could recommend two improvements to the company, one thing I would say is include better cables, because like I said, these are pretty short cables, maybe like 12 or 16 or 18 inches, something like that. But not only just the length, but also the thickness of this is around 25 millimeters. So I would say, you probably want to include longer or thicker cables at least. And I'm not even sure if these are pure copper or copper clad aluminum, just going by flexibility alone. I want to say copper clad aluminum, but that's a terrible way to tell. But like I said, that would just be my guess. Also, the second thing would be to not require creating an account on the app in order to use the app with this inverter, right? Or even if they kept that, just include like an offline mode or something such that you don't have to have the app to use this, right? So that would be one thing to do. I don't even know if you can use the app offline, mainly because it requires you to create an account and sign in. Once you're signed in, and if you're offline, maybe it'll work, I'm not sure. But the point is, but some people just don't want to create an account to use it, right? So that would be one major improvement. The other things, like I said, minor things, if you want to just jibber jabber or complain about small stuff, is maybe make at least some of the holes, mounting holes on here, not just slotted but also round, so that if these get installed in a place that high vibration, it can't just fall off because they're both slotted, right? You want like some round mounting holes. But other than that, like I said, this inverter seems solid. You're getting a 2000-watt 12-volt inverter, which is probably not the best, what I would say, voltage to be running at, but I understand why they made it a 12-volt inverter, because most cars and most RVs, which is where this would mainly be installed, are 12-volt systems, right? But in order to go from 12 volts to, let's just say, 2000 watts, that's a lot of amperage it's going to have to draw. So make sure you are using the right battery supply to use this, right? If you're putting this in your car or an RV, maybe you have extra batteries, or maybe you have an upgraded alternator that can put out more power, right? Obviously, your engine would have to be running for that kind of situation. But if you have additional capacity batteries, you want to make sure you're supplying this inverter with at least minimum, I would say, about 200 amp hours not amp hours, but 200 amp BMS capacity, right? So that means if you have a 100 amp battery BMS, like a standalone battery that has about 100 amp BMS, you need at least 2 of them in parallel to sufficiently supply the power to this, right? Because like I said, I don't know what the math works out to, maybe about 166 or something like that amps to get 2,000 watts at 12 volts at 100% efficiency, right? Which obviously it's not going to be, so just assume maybe you're going to be needing 170, 180 amps to get 2,000 watts. That's a lot of juice you have to supply to make that happen, all right? So, like I said, hopefully this video helped you guys out. If you have any questions, let us know. If you want to buy this inverter, maybe we'll see if we'll contact the company, see if we can get like a discount code or something like that. We'll throw it in the description below, but hopefully you would buy this if you need this inverter, because I do have another, cheaper inverter that I kind of bought off Amazon to put in the car, and that was probably not the best inverter to get, but at the time we just wanted to get one of the smallest things. But this is a pure sine wave inverter, in case I didn't mention it. Anyways, back to it. Hopefully this video helped you guys out. If you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, have a great day, and we'll see you guys next time.